Good to see you too.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. Isn't it a miracle that we all chose this tonight? We could be anywhere in the world, but we're all in this room. And emotions are welcome, but cell phones, please silence them. And speaking of silence, why don't we take a moment of silence for the tragic loss of lives recently in Buffalo. I don't have much to say about that. I'm still in shock. I know some venues have canceled events, but my feeling has been to keep going. And we've been hit with so many things in the last few years with COVID and wars and race wars and media manipulation. And it just never ends. So we don't need any more of that. So, but you know, it's scary when it's that close to home. The reason I'm doing an ode to Beethoven is I've done shows where I've done odes to teachers that I've had, but never to like a influence. And Beethoven is special because he was my biggest classical influence, but also because of what he overcame. Obviously, many of you know that he became deaf during his career. But he kept going. There's a great chance I'm going to get emotional during the evening. Don't say that. Sorry. Overcoming deafness when you're a musician, like you can imagine, is like insane. Like that's, I mean. But the way he flipped it, the way he made it work, is he made it music not about himself, because that's all he could do. He could not enjoy the benefits, although he did through the vibrations of the music. He would cut the legs off of his baby or grand piano, whatever he had, on the hardwood floor so that he could feel the vibration of the music. And I think he wrote some of his best pieces when he was deaf, and he turned deaf in his mid-40s. I'm going to read an essay I wrote about him in college and how his life is involved with Masonry, Freemasonry, and so I'm sure the brothers here will appreciate that, but I'll try to make it interesting. Ludwig van Beethoven's precise date of birth is unknown. He was baptized on December 17th, 1770, and it's presumed he was born on December 16th. He is well recognized for his music that still holds strong today, but few know about the mysterious and unusual aspects of his life. Beethoven was a Freemason that was closely allied with the most infamous of all Masonic orders, the Illuminati of Bavaria, a group that only openly existed for 6 years. Okay, Illuminati. In the 90s, my introduction to Nate Freemasons and the Illuminati was rather sinister and twisted. I was searching for truth in my 20s, and conspiracy theories had started to flood the internet. It was the dawn of the internet, and it was all Illuminati, Freemasons, New World Order, sinister groups manipulating the whole world behind closed doors, and scary stuff. The more research I did, I realized the Illuminati was actually cool, and everything the Christian right fundamentalists were saying was kind of backwards. You just had to do a little bit of research. So there is some of that in here, but if we have questions after, I can talk more about that. As many of you know, there have been many famous Freemasons in history, especially many presidents of the United States. I'm not going to go through that list, it's very long. Other than presidents, other composers like Mozart, Haydn, Liszt, Wagner, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Nat King Cole, Walt Disney, and William Shakespeare, to name a few. Reviewing Beethoven's connection to this mystery is not an easy task, as theorists have suggested over the millennium that the facts of history could have been altered or manipulated to preserve the integrity and secrets of such secret societies. Some theorists, scholars, researchers, and conspiracy junkies that tend to fall to the extreme right still claim today that the Illuminati and Freemasons are demonic in nature and control the financial and media sectors of the entire planet, plotting a global takeover. Others say the societies were just artistic free thinkers that believed in freedom and romantic ideals. The majority of conspiracy researchers of the past 200 years all agree that Freemasonry is intimately allied to Zionism, atheism, secularism, scientism, humanism, skepticism, socialism, and almost everything else conservatives dislike. That's not true. Some of that's not true, but anyway. During Beethoven's years in Bonn, he met with members of the Illuminati, notably Count Waldstein. This was a time when free thinking was popular and Bonn was a university city, where many ideas circulated during the years leading up to the French Revolution. Beethoven at the time was growing more fond of literature and began reading more. He searched for world literature, mythology, art, philosophy, and religion. His readings in Kant, Homer, Schiller, Herder, the ancient classical writers, the modern romantics, and in Masonic and Brahmin texts widened his range of wisdom. In 1784, the Bonn Illuminati dissolved in fear of prohibition, but re-established in 1787 under a different name, Friends of Literature. Beethoven took a liking for the reformist Emperor Joseph II, who provided the first embodiment of the hero in Beethoven's music. In 1790, in the cantata on the death of Joseph II, these early works were apparently directly paid for by the Illuminati. This cantata was not performed during Beethoven's lifetime, and the score was lost until 1884, which was in the possession of the composer Hummel, who apparently bought it at an auction in 1813. During the Enlightenment era, it was new that art reflect a form of revolutionary politics, and Beethoven took this to another level. Most people were arrested or imprisoned for being less outspoken. Music and art were considered weapons against tyranny. Secret police were present in the audience of the premiere of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony to ensure that no treason was sung. It was, but they didn't notice. The question still remains if the Lenowski family, which lodged Beethoven for the first 2 years of his stay in Vienna in 1794, were members of the Illuminati. Their relationship transcended that of what a typical artist and patron relationship was, especially pertaining to his love affair with Princess Lichnowsky. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It is likely that the relations Beethoven made in Bonn were critical to his financial support through his life in Vienna, while influencing many of his works. The words of some vocal works, including the opera Fidelio and the Ninth Symphony, explicitly reflect the influence of Enlightenment thought, and even directly quote from the early Illuminati-sponsored cantata. Beethoven also supplemented his income working with aristocrats and by doing deals with publishers and accepting paid commissions, but some facts remain unknown about how well he was financially backed by other sources. Beethoven was well aware he would not have sufficient time to complete his creative endeavors, and it is documented through his letters that he begged of such a scenario where he could be paid to be himself and write music. Is that not the dream of any musician to fancy? Beethoven tried to design his life around being creative and in which he could flourish. His intent was to eliminate whatever he perceived to be superfluous and trivial. Some might say this is why he never married. In 1824, he wrote, "Only in my divine art do I find the support which enables me to sacrifice the best part of my life to the heavenly muses." Some of his sacrifices and turmoil even brought him to live in quasi-monastic solitude away from the city. There are many indications that Beethoven was influenced greatly by the ideas of speculative Freemasonry and other religious-like doctrines associated with world religions, which also include esoteric ritual practices of the religions of the East and the Antique. Some refer Beethoven to the mysterious and exotic religions around the world that were vastly described in the literature of the Freemasons and other advanced fraternal societies and groups like the Egyptian Satic, Osirian, Orphic, Eleusinian, Kabbalistic, Dionysian, as well as deistic views that described higher states of being and the supernatural. His diaries reflect signs of his struggle to connect with God by creating his laborious works that aim to strive for righteousness. He creates important aspects of a romanticist view of the world. In his person, he exemplifies the survival of the illuminist moral political ideal, disconnected from its historical context, and long after the suppression and fragmentation of the order that had given rise to it. In the aftermath of the Enlightenment, he became an active agent in the configuration of a deep, individual, and utterly vital world outlook. Beethoven was unique because of his relentless determination to make an impact through his works. He had a deep spiritual side that leaned towards martyrdom, but as he matured, so did his sense of purpose and intimate spiritual duty. Thus, Beethoven chose art over life precisely because, for him, art provided plentiful compensations here and hereafter that were unavailable by other means. Music, through its creation, required great sacrifices, was not itself a sacrificial burden. Rather, it offered innumerable strategies of prolongation to fend off forebodings of a darkening horizon. Through music, Beethoven could locate and limn realms of permanence, constantly renewable, impervious to the forces of decay and disintegration. Through music, he could create impregnable, unified structures, describe endless forms of transcendence over hostile energies, inscribe narratives of return and reminding and rebeginning, forge a channel between himself and a forbearing deity, invoke the healing powers of music. He could guarantee validitous outcomes, overcome extreme odds, declare himself and us victors in every deadly game. In his music, Beethoven could create ecstasy so powerful that they momentarily eradicated fear, or at least made it endurable. That some might regard such matters as merely symbolic and therefore both illusory and transient, might well be immaterial to a true believer, to one who had experienced the full might of music as palpable reality. Beethoven transformed all of his emotions and struggles into complex music. He captured and carried all of his most intimate moments with nature, women, and society, and brought them to his musical palette, never ceasing to report in the most profound way. Although he did have some dry years and obvious struggles, this was all part of his spiritual path. He seemed to fully endure his yearning to be a servant to the world in the highest form, one entirely committed to their art, so that people might resonate with the music and endure rich and higher realms of experiential consciousness. His music manifested in a language that is otherwise untranslatable or impossible to express, other than to listen and experience it wholly through the medium of song. Through this, he conveyed a deep acknowledgement of personal triumphs he overcame, an indescribable depth of the beauty he encountered in the world and his relationships with others. The wisest of the sages and philosophers had known that music is among the most potent of all means through which the human consciousness is altered, for better or worse, according to the music. That Beethoven held great spiritual aspirations to serve humanity is also clear in the letter he wrote in 1823. There is no loftier mission than to approach the Godhead more nearly than other mortals, and by means of that contact to spread the rays of Godhead through the human race. Almost done here with this. The paradox in the mysterious life of Beethoven reiterates the commonly known aspects of his physical life, his ill temper, his sadness and proneness to be solitary, the loss of his immortal beloved, and mostly his gradual and profound deafness. His strong spirituality and insights are reflected in his own writings. He says, "I would have ended my life. The only thing that held me back was my art. Almighty God, you see into my heart, and you know that it is filled with love for humanity and a desire to do good. Ever since my childhood, my heart and soul have been imbued with a tender feeling of goodwill, and I have always been inclined to accomplish great things." Some of the details of his life and his associations to mysterious groups or persons remain uncertain, but the fact of the matter is, Beethoven's music is still some of the most powerful music in the world today. Conspiracy theorists should more properly investigate the commonly linear views of such as like the Christian fundamentalists and others that link Freemasonry and the infamous Illuminati to sinister origins, when a member like Beethoven gave the world nothing but his best, and a lot of beautiful music to prove it. So, that's the essay. Beethoven influenced, and other classical composers influenced everything we listen to today. We don't sometimes remember that, but even dubstep, everything goes back to classical music. So, I mean, I relate to him, obviously, because I was in a tragic car accident, and I didn't know if I was going to make music again, because I lost some fingers, and it was a big mess for a bunch of years, and I actually just started writing. So I'm going to play some songs that I wrote, but first, I think we'll open it up. There's some questions or comments about Beethoven.
You talk about Beethoven and his connection with the Masonry and the Illuminati, but the two, Illuminati and Masonry, were never linked together. Correct?
Well, it's a little confusing because the first paragraph, it says, it almost makes the original Illuminati sound like it was a branch of Masonry, but I don't think that's true. So I'd have to look a little more closely at that. There's also questions of whether Beethoven was a Freemason or not, but from my research, it's leaning towards he was. And people that have documented, like, the way he talked and referenced some Freemasonry and his handshake. During those times, Freemasonry was outlawed, so they didn't keep records. So it was hard to track anything down attached to Masonry at that time. But he talked, he walked like a Mason, but I would say he was a Mason. Anybody else have any?
Did you find any connection where Beethoven may have used some, incorporated into his music some of the esoteric intervals or rhythms from some of the more esoteric side of thing with Hermetic studies and things that were going on in Europe at the time?
Wave over my head. That was beautiful.
Were you here for the whole?
I heard a little, most of it, but yeah.
Because I touched on a little bit of that, but
I wonder if you could expand a little more.
I couldn't, to be honest. This is like all I know.
Okay, yeah, I know, I'm pretty sure that in that era, there was a lot of there were hidden codes put into the music a lot of times, based on those intervals and things, so it would be interesting to study that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
Yes.
That goes back to church music too. Music of, say Gregorian chant. I mean, maybe one of the most famous symbols is the tritone, the devil's in
Right.
So, I would, there's probably a lot of that.
Yeah. It's funny, because I'm not comparing my skill to Beethoven in any way, but these guys were crazy, but the skill and focus of these classical composers is just, those were different times, it's quite a difference, but if there's no other comments or questions, we can begin to use it. Yes, hopefully I cleared up any negative views of Masonry. I do have friends that are very skeptical of Masonry. And I was too before I knew it, and I didn't think I would ever be a Mason. I just met nothing but good people since I've been here. Everyone has their unique characteristics. Everyone I've met has added something to this lodge. So I have no evidence of anything even remotely sinister in my experience. So, shall we play some music? The first piece is a opus I'm working on. I'm not sure if it's finished, but it's called Opus 312.
Hey, Jason, remove the stand that you had the thing on.
Fine.
You want me to get it for you?
Sure. Just be careful of the cord.
Yeah, do you want to leave it there, because we can see better if it's not. I can just take it to the top right off.
Let me put it back here.
Just the way I was thinking, you know, like.
Much better. Good
Yeah.
call.
Yes.
Oh, just one more thing. I saw someone earlier that I hadn't seen in a really long time. They're like, "You look good." I have no doubt that's not a compliment. It means you usually look like shit. Thank you. This next song is called The Voice of Love by Angelo Badamalenti from the Twin Peaks soundtrack. Piece, we don't know what it is, because it's improv, and we really have no idea.
That's my name too, so.
Jokingly, because you're like, oh!
That's not fun.
Alex Cousins on cello. Moshe-Miranda Shulman on violin. And then they had one rehearsal together. This whole thing came together in like 2 weeks. Gary stood up at a meeting and was like, "Hey, let's make a public event." I'm like, "Holy crap.
It was
I
magical.
better put something together." So thanks for coming, and feel free to hang out for a little bit. Really, thank you for being here, and be safe. And I hope everybody takes whatever they got from tonight and just is able to move a little bit closer to whatever you want and desire. Thank you.